hospital. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And it's January 1st has come and gone, and the commander-in-chief has been unable to stop the enlistment of transgender troops.
Not that that's necessarily stopping him from trying. We'll give you some details. And while he's waiting to accomplish that, he fired the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV and AIDS. And that's not even the worst thing he did over the holidays.
And we're going to bring you an excoriating indictment of Trump by Jeffrey Wright at the Human Rights Campaign dinner earlier in the year in San Francisco to sum all this up.
Yeah. In Texas, good news, twice as many LGBT people are running for public office in 2018 than ever before.
It is Time's Up for Sexual Harassment. That's the name of a new organization formed by women, including Hollywood lesbians, who've come together to fight it in the entertainment business and in blue-collar occupations.
More good news. Anti-gay bakers in Oregon are ordered to pay their fine for refusing service to a lesbian couple.
In upstate New York, a lesbian couple and their 2 young children were brutally murdered. 2 suspects have been arrested.
If you missed PBS's The Untold Stories of Armistead Maupin, it's now available online. We'll give you the details.
And same-sex marriage is still up in the air in Bermuda as we speak.
Transgender people can now enlist in the armed forces.
For the first time. I mean, this had not been allowed.
Yes, openly transgender people.
This had not been allowed in the Obama administration, which started to let transgender people serve openly, but the open enlistment just started. And in fact, a guy named Nicholas Talbot, 24, a trans man from Ohio, who was a plaintiff in one of the cases, is going to be one of the first to enlist.
The Department of Justice announced that it would not appeal the lower court rulings to the Supreme Court to continue to try to stop it.
But they are still defending the ban that Trump wants in district courts in D.C., Maryland, California, and Washington State.
And they also have underway another Defense Department independent study because they want to get around the 80 million studies they've already done. And they say they're waiting for the results of that study to decide whether to challenge this more. Yeah. Fat chance.
Since we last spoke, Trump fired the remaining 16 members of the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS. Now, 6 others had resigned in June, I guess it was. But this is, eliminating the few willing to push back.
Well, let's put some context on this. He sent a letter by FedEx because he doesn't trust the Postal Service anymore.
He's afraid. Here's the guy who fired everybody on TV, right in front of them, but he's afraid to do it in person now.
So he sends a FedEx letter to all the current sitting members of the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV and AIDS, which was created by President Clinton back in the early 90s. Telling them that they no longer have a job. Okay, so it is not at all unusual for an incoming administration to change personnel. Mm-hmm. Obama got rid of the Presidential AIDS Advisory Committee that had served under George Bush and replaced it with his members. But the problem is that Trump, even though they are advertising for new members in the Federal Register, has not made any commitment to the issues or to the people. So let's run down a few things. He has not appointed a director of the Office of National AIDS Policy. He, of course, recently was quoted as having referred to Haitian immigrants as all having AIDS. Didn't he desert Roy Cohn when he was dying of AIDS?
Oh, yes. That's when he cut him off. And Roy Cohn was his mentor. If you want to know why Trump is the way he is in many respects, he learned from Roy Cohn and then dumped him when he got AIDS.
Exactly. He proposed big budget cuts to the Centers for Disease Control and the president's emergency, the PEPFAR program that delivers funds to fight HIV and AIDS around the world. Congress restored a lot of that money, but his proposal was to cut it all. He's made pro forma statements of support on things like World AIDS Day or National HIV Testing Day.
Without mentioning gay people.
Yeah, but meanwhile he's decimating Medicaid, and which helps 40% of people living with HIV.
People aren't going to be able to get their drugs.
Yeah.
Likely.
And censoring the words like transgender in CDC grant proposals. So he has this long record of acting against people with HIV and AIDS down the line. So he may appoint a new commission, presidential AIDS, advisory committee on HIV and AIDS. But I suspect that it will be heavily weighted to the right-wing evangelical community.
Yes.
And be talking mostly about things like abstinence instead of sex education or HIV/AIDS education.
When we worked at the Hedrick Martin Institute for LGBT Youth years ago, I was on an AIDS advisory council at the Board of Education, and 2 members, political people from the Archdiocese of New York, were there sabotaging as much as they could. And then they realized the Board of Education is not going to do anything, so they stopped coming to meetings. And then we passed a comprehensive plan, including condom availability.
Is that the one that got you on the
1991.
front page of the New York Post?
Well, my condom instructions that I typed out for how to use a condom.
Yeah.
The problem there was that when you go from the various steps of using the condom, part of it is having sex. So I just said, have fun. That was what I wrote, and it got us in trouble. Having fun during sex.
Well, the point is that Trump. He has so many sins and so many programs he's decimated. So this got some attention for firing the council,
Yeah.
but I think the real story is not that he fired them, but what he's doing
Yes.
in general
Well,
about the epidemic, which is nothing.
Look at the things that
and what he may replace
Look
them
at the
with.
things that happened over the holidays that did not get as much attention, including David Koch paying for the fireworks on New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago. And him going in to see his rich friends and saying, you all just got a lot richer.
Yes.
Rescinding Obama-era regulations on fracking and oil spill prevention.
Yes.
This is going to affect a lot of us older people and people with AIDS. Letting nursing homes off the hook when patients suffer at their hands. There's been a huge exodus of managers at enforcement agencies like OSHA, protecting all of us, safety.
Yeah.
Scrap the Amtrak tunnel between New York and New Jersey, so we're not going to be able to travel to you anymore, Ann and I. And sabotaging the Census Bureau by adding on this question about citizenship.
It is a relentless march of destruction. They've set out their plan. They want to destroy it all, and they are one by one doing each of these
We're
steps.
going to show you Jeffrey Wright talking about all the record. I was very struck by the Trump accuser, Jessica Leeds, who's now 75, the one who we went after on the plane, telling her story, amplifying her story in the 1970s when Trump just grabbed her under her dress, grabbed her genitals. She says she's never worn a dress or a skirt while traveling since. And then she said she encountered him at a charity dinner a couple of years later, maybe within the year, because he comes up to the table. He's with Ivana, his then first wife, and he says, "Oh, you're the C word from the plane." That's the way he looks at her, and that's what he says. And this is in front of everybody. Wow. This guy got elected president of the United States.
So my first memory of Jeffrey Wright was in Angels in America, where he plays Belize, and was just spectacular on Broadway. And was he in the TV movie, the HBO version too?
I think.
Maybe. But he's done a lot of things, and you'll recognize him as a very famous and popular actor.
Basquiat, playing the painter.
Basquiat?
Yeah, Basquiat.
Jean-Michel. So he was given an Ally Award at the Human Rights Campaign dinner in San Francisco last fall, October, I think.
Yes.
And he gave a rip-roaring speech that talked about, worked its way around to talking about Trump. So be patient with this. It takes a little while for him to work out his theme, but it's so striking and so powerful that we thought it was really important to show.
There are a couple of bleeped words. You'll know what they are. And this goes on for about 16 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This really means a lot to me, and it's wonderful to be back at a human rights campaign gala. Last time I was with HRC was down in Charlotte, North Carolina, on behalf of another HRC in more sensible times. Still, it's nice to be back in these weirder days, although it doesn't take much to prompt me to come to San Francisco. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. One day I hear San Francisco will be great again, so that's going to be good. I have to admit that I struggled a bit over what to say tonight, partly because I find writing torturous, because writing's torturous, but moreover because I have no idea what the hell is going on right now in our country. I'm baffled, and it's not to say that I don't understand that we have a f***ing moron in the White House. And I understand that because, well, his senior cabinet member reportedly said so. And I take his and the press's word on that, at least, because for as long as I've had the misfortune of being conscious of the existence of his now boss, I, too, have believed him to be a f***ing moron. So no argument there. I understand that. But many don't see him like that, and I don't understand that. I struggle to understand that an individual who says, as our president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology one day, but then who snuggles up yesterday with a domestic group that distributes pamphlets declaring homosexuality a public health issue, a group also addressed yesterday by the Republican senatorial candidate from Alabama who once said he thinks homosexuality should be illegal, whatever the fuck that means. I struggle to understand how that individual is not universally and objectively viewed as lying, untrustworthy, and bankrupt. One of his first orders of business before being sworn into the presidency was settling a fraud case for $25 million. What more does anyone need to see, aside from his tax returns? Guy personally lost $900 million in 1 year, but great businessman. Oh, okay. I have difficulty understanding how an individual who 5 times forced someone else to fight in his place in Vietnam and perhaps die there, and who objects to protests during the national anthem because, by his logic, they are disrespectful of America's service members, can also attempt to ban transgender service members from, well, serving, and still not universally and objectively be seen as disrespectful to American service members himself. People serving honorably right now in the military are being told by the commander-in-chief, or rather the comb-over-in-tweet, that they have no right to do so. What's more disrespectful than that, except sending them off into another avoidable, senseless war whose only purpose would be to offset the sense of hollowness and smallness their comb-over must feel owing to his tiny burnt crisp of a damaged soul. Couldn't serve in Vietnam because of bunions or whatever, yet as a candidate, his doctor puts it out that he'll be the healthiest individual elected to the presidency. Healthiest. The guy who's said to believe that the human body is like a battery with a finite amount of energy which exercise drains, and who's built like a wrecked garbage truck. But he's the healthiest. I mean, I don't want to go on harping about this moron, but it's one of the many lead linings of his presidency that we have to pay such close attention to this abysmal excuse of a human being. But I'm trying to understand those eyes which refuse to see him that way, which refuse to see him as the empty con man that he is. And so I remembered a gentleman I met a few years ago, Robert Trivers, a Harvard-trained social biologist who, at one point in his career, moved out here to teach at UC Santa Cruz and was introduced to and began to write and research with none other than Black Panther's co-founder, Huey Newton, who'd been a graduate student in the History of Consciousness program at Santa Cruz. Probably would have been a Westworld fan. Trivers and Newton ended up pursuing a mutual academic interest, the phenomenon of self-deception. Now, Newton's interest sprang from a long-time fascination with con games, large and small, and Trivers' interest sprang from trying to make sense of self-deception as a behavior passed down over the course of human evolution. In the natural world, Trivers mentions self-deception can be advantageous. A butterfly cocoon might resemble a snake's head to ward off hungry predators. Newton noted that self-deception can have social advantages for humans. A Latino American, for example, might pretend to know less English than she actually does to avoid interaction with an undesirable gringo. Trivers offered that in a fight, exaggerating one's size through a puffed-up chest, for example, can trick an equally strong adversary into feelings of inferiority. But self-deception practiced too long, they argued, can also lead to disaster when overconfidence and inattention to reality combine. Reality isn't a fool. So in 1982, they co-wrote a controversial and brutally insightful analysis of the factors behind the Air Florida disaster that saw a passenger jet crash into Washington, D.C.'s 14th Street Bridge minutes after takeoff in the midst of a very heavy snowstorm, most of its passengers perishing in the frigid waters of the Potomac River. And I remember that day vividly. I was a junior in high school at the time, and on my way home from school, I stopped on the other side of the Potomac to view the aftermath of the crash, along with a friend who shared my strange 16-year-old shivering curiosity. And my friend and I almost froze our tails off and didn't see much. But on examining the cockpit voice recording months after the tragedy, Trivers and Newton saw plenty. Based on what they'd heard on those recordings and read on the transcript, they argued that the accident could have been averted were it not for the attitude and behavior of the doomed plane's pilot, whom they described as a self-deceiver. On the day of the incident, the pilot was not in fact piloting the plane, but acting as co-pilot to his co-pilot, who was actually manning the controls, perhaps in a training exercise, and whom Trivers and Newton characterized as a reality seeker. And here's why. 30 minutes before takeoff, when asked by the co-pilot about ice on the wing on the side of the plane, the pilot answers, I got a little on mine. Co-pilot, however, describes his wing in more precise terms. This one's got about 1/4 to 1/2 inch on it all the way. Later, it was discovered that the airplane was experiencing 25% less thrust than normal, owing to snow and ice built up on the wings because the plane was de-iced too long before takeoff. As a result of this, 10 seconds after starting down the runway, with only 30 seconds left to abort takeoff safely, the co-pilot notices discrepancies in the plane's instrument readings. Co-pilot, God, look at that thing. Pilot, no response. Co-pilot, that doesn't seem right, does it? Pilot, no response. That's not right. Pilot, nothing. Well, then 11 seconds after the co-pilot first expresses concerns about whether the instrument reading is correct, the pilot responds, yes, it is. There's 80, referring to an airspeed of 80 knots. Immediately, the co-pilot, nah, I don't think that's right. Nothing again from the pilot. 9 seconds later, the co-pilot acquiesces. Maybe it is. Pilot says 120, again referring to the plane's speed. I don't know, co-pilot. 8 seconds later, the plane reaches the speed at which takeoff can no longer be aborted, and strangely, now the pilot becomes more vocal. Come on, forward, just climb, he says at one point, as though now imploring the plane itself to respond to his voice. The last tragic words heard on the cockpit recording are, co-pilot, Larry, we're going down, Larry. Pilot, finally acknowledging the now dark reality, bemoans, I know it. Then the sound of impact. And it's a tragic event. And Trivers and Newton offer us a disturbing interpretation of the event, but a useful one for these strange times that we live in. the controls of our government are now in the hands, the small hands, of an overconfident, self-deceiving pilot who day after day resists a healthy relationship with reality. Of the 320 million people in this country, nobody's stronger than him, he tells us. Nobody will fight harder for LGBTQ rights than him. Nobody. Nobody in this room. Nobody could have done more for Puerto Rico than what he's done. Over 90% of Puerto Ricans still have no electricity. 35% remain without access to clean drinking water, some now gathering water from an EPA-designated hazardous waste site. But nobody does it better than him. The images shown and the reports read from journalists on the ground, all fake. We're the highest taxed nation in the world, he says. The French laugh in our general direction. And of our country, which he and his supporters view as historically damaged, he alone can fix it. Puffed up, self-deceptive nonsense, which many Americans delight in swallowing whole. This cult of self-deceivers who claim our country, not yours, our flag. As though the flag doesn't represent the right to freedom of speech, but only the right to deploy the military. Those black NFL players kneeling during the anthem are sons of bitches. Nazis marching in Charlottesville, well, some of them are very fine people. But he's not a racist, and neither am I for still supporting him, as if racism is not an objective thing. It is. The whole premise of white supremacy itself is a vast exercise in self-deception. Look at its leader in the White House. Who's he superior to? Obama? Thank you. I'm going to replace Obamacare with something much better. With what exactly? Well, we'll see. But what we see, and what's mind-blowing, is that our collective American organism is infected right now with self-deception. And maybe it's always been that. The greatest country in the world, every other country's a bum. But as the American experiment begins to stall in mid-flight and descend toward impact, will the self-deceivers have their I know it moment? Or is this what they want? They seem to. But a better question is, will reality-seeking America wrestle the controls away from self-deception in order to rescue the plane and all its passengers? Because the reality is, a sexual predator in Hollywood is the same as one in the White House or one in a church, and all should be dealt with consistently. The reality is, Judge Alonzo Curiel is an American citizen, whether or not you want to describe him cynically as a Mexican and a racist attempt to disparage him in one breath and talk law and order and the Constitution in the next. And the reality is, we don't worship God in the United States of America. The Constitution says we worship freely, whether Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, pagan, or otherwise, if we so choose. And oh, by the way, a claim of religiosity isn't a cloak of invisibility for your hatred and bigotry and unconfronted fear. Reality seeking sees through all that. The reality is that those folks who suffered and died at Pulse nightclub shared an undeniable tragic commonality with those folks who died recently in Las Vegas while enjoying a night of country music. And undoubtedly between those two groups there were divergent political perspectives, but sadly the reality is that they all shared vulnerability to a deranged man with access to ridiculously powerful weapons. And the reality is that a kid who dies from a stray bullet in Chicago or from police misconduct in Baltimore deserves, as an American, the same empathy and attention that's allegedly being shown by this administration to a kid who dies from an opioid overdose in New Hampshire. We're all in it together, and that's the reality. And resistance against the self-deceivers who say or act otherwise is essential right now. To paraphrase the words spoken at the Women's March in D.C. by another Bay Area legend, Angela Davis, every day of this administration will be a day of resistance, resistance on the ground, resistance in the classrooms, resistance on the job, resistance in our art, and resistance in our music. She's a reality seeker. Bob Mueller and his team are reality seekers, experienced in the realities of international financial crimes, espionage, and conspiracy. Angela Davis and the former head of the FBI are on the same side in this resistance. That brings hope. And I find hope in this award. I love this word ally. That Human Rights Campaign considers me an ally of the LGBT community is deeply gratifying, but it also implies as well that this community is an ally to me, and that's deeply comforting. Because we all come from experiences and backgrounds that have taught us to fight. And this isn't new to us, and we don't scare easily. And all of us right now must ally with one another and fight for control of this American plane. And we must continue to carve through the misinformation and lies, to speak out, to protest, to sue, to take a knee, sure, but also to vote. And so I accept this honor in celebration of the reality that no matter our background, class, race, religion, or sexual orientation, we are bound by our common humanity, and as relates to this country, by our common Americanness. And no self-deceiver or fucking moron can or will ever take that away from us, because it is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey Wright. How about Jeffrey Wright for president?
I was just thinking the same thing. So smart,
Really?
so powerful, really brilliant analysis, and a message for all of us for time to come.
Yeah.
And by the way, there will be women's marches in the next couple of weeks. On the weekend of January 20th and 21st, some places Saturday, some places Sunday. You can Google Women's March 2018 and find out what's going on in your particular city. Here in New York, it's on Saturday, and we're gathering on Central Park West and marching to Bryant Park. So that's what's
Bundle
happening.
up.
I'm hoping we'll be out of this nonsense by then. But that's, yeah, resistance every day.
And if you want something else to be outraged over, I read this week that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, he's retracted guidance from the Obama Department of Justice to state courts to end debtors' prisons. This is the kind of thing that put people in Ferguson, Missouri in jail all the time because they couldn't pay fines and that. So it's just bottomless.
Well, it's always been ironic that they would put people in jail when they can't pay fines rather than let them earn money to pay fines.
Last week, Sessions pulled 25 other civil rights guidances, 10 related to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, on the other hand, we had some mercy in New York. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, he pardoned a trans woman named Lorena Borjas, who is a former sex worker and is an HIV prevention worker. She had a lot of, we have a picture of her, she had a lot of convictions, she's there in the middle.
In the middle.
She had a lot of old convictions, they were all related to her being trafficked. And she's an immigrant, and she was in danger of being deported by the Trump people. So this pardon allows her to stay.
She's been providing services to people out of her home for years. HIV testing, prevention, whatever. So that's good. And there's a little resistance on a lighter note in Aspen, where the Pences rented a home for a little, I guess, Christmas vacation. One of their neighbors put up this rainbow flag on...
It's a pillar that stands between both of their driveways. It's their common driveway, rather, that they both have to use. So the sheriff showed up, deputy sheriff, and said, you know, we're not here to interfere with your First Amendment rights. And the deputy sheriff got fed chili. So
the flag has "Make America Gay Again" written on it for those of you who are listening to the podcast.
Well, it's similar to what
it.
happened when Pence moved into a Washington neighborhood when he was going to become vice president. They all started flying rainbow flags. It's great that this is a symbol of resistance.
Yep. Yeah.
We own the rainbow. You know, this has sparked so much outpouring of people who now who hear what Jeffrey Wright is saying, who feel the same things and want to do something about it. So people are running for office all over the country. Most notably, we got this report from Texas where there are twice as many LGBT people running for public office as ever have run before, and but there's a big anti-gay candidate
in Texas at one. Yes, I'm sure
but
there
wait,
are many.
this is a little extreme. You know, you've already got an anti-gay governor there, Greg Abbott, but he is being challenged in the Republican primary by a guy he's named Larry Secede Kilgore. He believes two of the Democrats in the race, Lupe Valdez and Jeffrey Payne, who are gay, should be put to death along with other sodomites. This is biblical law, he said, and it's a blessing. Valdez, who's 70, says she's not defined by her sexual orientation, but she's out there and running.
Well, she's the longtime sheriff of Dallas County.
38 LGBT candidates running there in Texas.
Well, some have already been elected in Salt Lake City. In Salt Lake City, which has, of course, a lesbian mayor,
Jackie Biskupski.
Yes, they now have 3 of the 7 city council members who are LGBT, and every single member of the city council is under age 45. So they have a young, fresh city council, 3 out of 7 gay, and a lesbian mayor in Salt Lake. So maybe Mitt Romney won't get through so easily.
Well, but that's also the big question. I hope one of them runs from Salt Lake City, and I hope a good Democrat runs. And maybe Republicans will be divided because they won't see Mitt as far enough to the right. But who is Mitt Romney going to be in Utah? As governor of Massachusetts, he was pro-choice, he was pro-gay rights.
And who's he going to be in the United States Senate if he gets elected? Is he going to be an anti-Trump resistor, or is he going to go along with the Republican agenda?
He did debase himself after having condemned Trump as a fraud during the campaign by meeting with him to try to become Secretary of State.
Which turned out to be just a humiliation tour by Trump.
It was a fraud.
Yeah, it was.
So Roy Moore is still trying to sue, but Doug Jones was sworn in, I believe, today.
In Pennsylvania, in Doylestown, the city council has, by a vote of 7-1, barred conversion therapy for minors, and the one voted against it only because he says it should be a statewide law, not just a local law.
Right.
In a terrible story from upstate New York, outside Troy, New York, in a town called Lansingburg, a lesbian couple, Shanta Myers, 36 years old, on the right at the bottom, and her girlfriend, Brandy Mells, 22, on the left at the bottom, and Shanta's 2 kids, Jeremiah and Shanice, 11 and 5, were found brutally, viciously murdered in their home. They have arrested 2 guys and charged them with the murder.
Justin Mann and James White of Schenectady. I haven't heard
nothing
what
about the motive yet. Nothing about the motive.
Shanta has another son who's 15, Isaiah Smith, and he fears the murderers were going to be coming for him next.
They were beloved by their neighbors. They worked in very giving professions.
JJ was a beloved member of the Troy Boys and Girls Club, which is raising money for the funerals.
So this has been a huge story and a huge shock to the entire town, and people are really upset about it. And we will continue to follow this to see if we can figure out what the motive was and whether these guys are actually guilty. But it was a very, very brutal murder.
Well, speaking of crimes, Jan Wenner, who was the founder of Rolling Stone, was accused this week of sexually assaulting a guy named Jonathan Wells in 1983. When Wells was 27, Wenner was 37 and not out at that point. He said it was in the context of being offered a job as director of Rolling Stone Press, and then so he says that Wenner assaulted him, and that this happens in these stories. Apparently, some consensual sex followed, but even though Wells was not gay, and he tried to steer clear of Wenner, and then he got fired in 1985. Wenner says he believes all of it was consensual.
Yeah. In Santa Barbara, California, as we go down to a little more minor crime, the newspaper there, the News Press, is a very conservative newspaper, one of only 6 in the United States to endorse Donald Trump.
And the only one in California.
In 2016. So they have a reporter named Paul Gonzalez who published a story in the paper, but as the paper went to press, one of the workers there changed Paul's name on his byline to Paul Gay-Zales and wrote underneath it, News Press Faggot, fagot it's spelled. And this is what happens when you work in a press room. You can just do
the editor
junk like this.
Called it a poor decision. And the employee is not in the building anymore, but he's a Teamster. So he's not been fired.
Not yet. They're going to work on that.
Wow.
Woo! In Oregon, the Court of Appeals has upheld the $135,000 fine against Sweet Cakes by Melissa, the bakery that refused to make a wedding cake for a lesbian couple in 2013. This has been going on for over 4 years.
Lauren Bowman-Cryer. They've had their own hardships since this.
Yes.
They've had trouble renting because of the controversy.
Yep.
The 135 G's is in escrow, but is supposed to be released now. The Kleins are undecided about appealing.
And an annoying story out of Houston, Texas, where a young male couple got into an Uber car and then say that the driver threw them out for a small kiss. We may have a local news report on that.
Only on 2 tonight. Many people will be using ride-sharing companies tonight like Uber to get home safely, but one couple says they are looking for a different service after an Uber driver told them to get out of his car for kissing. The newly engaged couple believes the driver disapproved because they happen to be gay. Channel 2's Sophia Beausoleil is live near 59 in Newcastle, where the couple was left on the side of the road. Sophia?
Jonathan, the couple tells me that they were told to get out of the Uber right here on the feeder road, and they actually had to call another Uber in order to get home.
We just got engaged. We went to Dominican Republic for our anniversary, and
I asked him to marry me there.
Jose Chavez and Randall McGill are excited to tie the knot. Saturday night, they continued celebrating their new engagement at their friend's home, then called an Uber.
I wasn't doing anything that I wouldn't do in public. I'm not going to embarrass myself or my fiance.
The couple says they sat in separate seats in a minivan and had an aisle between them when they leaned in for a quick kiss.
I've never heard of anybody being asked to stop kissing anywhere, especially when you're just peck on the lips.
Jose and Randall say the driver told them to stop and that he couldn't take them anymore.
And then when he told us that, we were kind of like, okay, well, we didn't want to fight back. We didn't want to say anything. We were like, okay, fine.
But it's where the driver dropped them off that concerns them.
So he proceeds to pull off the freeway, not in any safe space, place, or anything. Leaves us on the corner of 59 in Newcastle.
An area that's pretty deserted, especially around 4 o'clock in the morning.
I was upset. I've never been told not to kiss or anything, don't do anything with my partner.
We looked up Uber's rules online. It says you shouldn't touch or flirt with other people in the car, and Uber has a no sex rule. But Jose and Randall say they've never had problems in the past when it comes to a quick kiss, and they feel they were targeted because they're gay.
I was super disappointed. Everyone I've ever ridden with has been very nice, very respectful, and even the ones that I could tell weren't so comfortable with carrying us, they were very respectful.
We spoke with Uber over the phone. They tell us the riders, along with the driver, did file a complaint about the situation last night, and that Uber is currently investigating and will take appropriate action. They did tell us they have a strict, non-discriminatory policy, and we have that information on our website, click2houston.com. Reporting live from Southwest Houston, Sophia Beausoleil, KPRC, Channel 2 News.
Now to develop.
Well, what do you think?
I think we should be treated by the same standards as everybody else.
Sure.
And I think if it is as they describe, nothing would happen to a heterosexual couple.
I'd be curious to hear what the driver has to say. I don't want to prejudge without
But still,
hearing his
dropping
story.
people off in the middle of nowhere is risking their lives.
Of course, and it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, well, I assume this no sex, no touching rule has to do with the fact that Uber drivers are driving their own cars. They're, you know, it's a more personal thing, but sex in cabs is certainly a traditional thing.
Indeed.
Not me, but
Yes, I
others.
remember Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver having to clean up the back of the seat all the time.
Now, I was interested to see, much as I want all of you to be glued to this show as your main source of news, Grindr has a very successful news service, drawing in millions of people on this site called intomore.com. I have to admit this was my first knowledge of this, but that's a new.
They're diversifying.
Yeah, you can look up intomore.com.
Soon they'll be taking over 20th Century Fox.
Probably. The Lambda Legal Defense staff has voted to unionize.
42-8.
Yep.
And they joined the Washington Baltimore News Guild. This was amid complaints about cuts to benefits and high turnover at the agency.
Yep. Yeah,
Right.
I have no idea what.
By the way, more on politics. In Virginia, you know, we talked about Donica Rome, who was the out transgender woman winning in the Virginia legislature. They had their first out lesbian in the assembly, Dawn Adams. She survived a recount.
Yeah.
She joins 3 out of 3 out gay men. But she's downplaying the historic nature of the election. All these people are. They're saying we won because of our substantive ideas.
Route 28.
She had the distinction of raising the fewest dollars of any Democrat who once seated a Republican. It would be nice to see that big money doesn't win.
And I would like to mourn the closing of Man's Country in Chicago. Just by reputation.
A 44-year-old bathhouse in Chicago.
But huge, you know, this was 3 floors at disco, restaurants.
They diversified over the years, too.
It was an enormous operation. But Chuck Renslow, who started it, died last year. We talked about him. And the operation is now closed down.
Among the celebrity patrons, Rudolph Nureyev, Paul Lind, and Waylon Flowers. Remember him on Hollywood Squares? He brought Madam, and he always draped Madam in a towel. Well, women were later admitted as members.
I know. What's the world coming to?
Right.
And we'd like to celebrate the lives of a couple of people who died in the last week. Ann Carrie Roth, 49 years old, a mover and shaker in Minnesota.
She was Deputy Minnesota Secretary of State.
Yeah, and a great ally for marriage equality, really prime force in moving marriage legalization in Minnesota. She also served on the boards of the Human Rights Campaign, Equality Federation, and Family Equality Council. I assume she must have LGBT children or relatives.
Well, she's survived by her husband Mark and 3 kids.
Yeah.
So
or maybe she just was
a nice person.
Yes,
How about that?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
And then Ben Barris died at 63. He was a very famous neuroscientist and the first transgender man elected to the National Academy of Sciences. He was quite eloquent about complaining about sexism in science.
Because he was a woman scientist before he was a man scientist.
Yes, in fact, he says, by far the main difference that I've noticed is that people who don't know I am transgendered treat me with much more respect as a man. I can even complete a whole sentence without being interrupted by a man.
He had a professor in college who said when she, at the time, solved this problem, oh, your boyfriend must have done this for you.
Yes.
I mean, that...
Well, he talked about, he said, I'm suspicious when those who are at an advantage proclaim that a disadvantaged group of people is innately less able. Historically, claims that disadvantaged groups are innately inferior have been based on junk science and intolerance.
Well, Ben published 167 peer-reviewed papers and changed the way we see the brain. You can read all about this if you want to know more, because it is fascinating stuff.
Ben Barris, Barres.
Yes.
Look him up.
All right. The Human Rights Campaign, speaking of which, is focusing a lot on Arizona and Pennsylvania. And they did a lot of polling there, and they found a lot of support for LGBT rights in both places. And they've got a Republican candidate for governor there in Pennsylvania, Paul Mango, who said he would veto legislation that allowed trans people to use restrooms based on gender identity. And the polling is even better in Arizona than it is in Pennsylvania. So this is what they're building on as they focus on these states to try to win back power in this country.
There is work to be done everywhere you are in this country, and we have to keep up the momentum this year for the midterm elections, but also special elections along the way. There continue to be special elections all over the country this year.
And there's this new group called Time's Up.
Yes.
This is being formed by mostly women in the entertainment business. They've raised $13 million for an initiative. There are 300 of them, actors, agents, writers, directors, to fight sexual harassment of women in blue-collar jobs, not just in the entertainment industry. But here's what they want. They want to penalize companies with non-disclosure agreements that stop people from suing. They want to drive to reach gender parity at the studios and at the talent agencies. They want women to wear black at the Golden Globes and perhaps other award shows to show solidarity.
Now.
Yep.
No more blue tuxedos.
And lots of prominent women: Shonda Rhimes, Ashley Judd, Eva Longoria, America Ferrara.
But the
Natalie
lesbian and bisexual women on the list that we've noticed so far: Lena Waithe, Ellen Page, Sarah Paulson, Angela Robinson, Anna Paquin. We are well represented in the group.
Yes. I saw the independent lens on PBS about Armistead Maupin, called The Untold Tales of Armistead Maupin. We have a link to independent lens there.
I saw it. I thought it was okay. I think you liked it more than I did.
Go to pbs.org/independent lens. Most controversial in the thing was him saying publicly that Rock Hudson was gay. Now, Rock Hudson is, he's got AIDS. This is all hitting the newspapers. He says, I was gay, and P.S., I slept with him back in the day.
Several times.
And this was caused a huge controversy in his life.
Are we going to do international news?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. In Taiwan, a Taipei court has refused to recognize a lesbian couple's marriage, refused to allow them to be married. Now, this is an ongoing fight. There's the couple. Last year in May, the Constitutional Court, or the High Court of Taiwan, said you must legalize same-sex marriage. You have 2 years to do it.
Yeah.
If you don't do it within that time, it automatically becomes law. So meanwhile, activists are trying to force that to happen sooner, but the other courts along the way are saying, no, the parliament has to do it. They haven't done it yet. We cannot legalize marriage for you within this period. You have to wait until the end of the 2-year period or have parliament pass it. Justice delayed is justice denied. In Malaysia, they're ganging up on trans women and trying to force them into conversion therapy. Yeah. A new use for conversion therapy. But in Canada, they have their first trans mayor, Julie Lemieux. Yep. In a village of Quebec called Tresson-Redempteur. It's true. And it was a very conservative community at one time, but of course their church has now become a community center. Yes, and what was her big, while Danica Rome was winning in Virginia on the basis of traffic problems on Route 28? Whether to allow chickens in the backyard, she favored it and won. She
She said people need renewal in the village. That was her platform.
In Chile, the mayor of Lampa has been fined for disrespecting trans women. She is a former city councilor, and she's been making nasty remarks, and so she has to pay a fine.
$380.
In Bulgaria, a lesbian couple is suing for recognition of their marriage last year in the UK.
In Venezuela, 2 marriage equality suits are in the final stages.
And in Russia, the first man from Chechnya to come out as gay and talk about his treatment there gave an interview to say his family had been threatened. He was forced to apologize on TV for claiming he was persecuted, but in fact he was persecuted and his family was threatened, and he's talking about it now.
In Egypt, the court has released 2 of those arrested for raising the rainbow flag at that concert in September on bail of 1,000 Egyptian pounds, or $52.37. Among the 7 arrested were charged for joining outlawed groups that aim to disrupt the provisions of the Constitution and the law. Sounds very general. What else? In Bermuda.
Yeah, we're still waiting.
Yeah, we're still waiting. Well, the governor whether the Governor General John Rankin, he's asking for legal advice of whether he can sign the bill ending marriage equality if it is not in line with the Constitution. There's no time frame for signing bills.
Yeah, but I think the debate is still over colonialism. You know, are they going to? The right wing says, look, we're the indigenous people, and we voted for civil unions over marriage. We think this is a legitimate compromise.
They are saying these people who passed this, that the European Union contract, or whatever it is, does not say you have to do this.
No, but they are a territory of the British government.
And the gay people who sued for marriage equality and won at a lower court could appeal that to the high court in Bermuda and maybe get it that way.
Well, the other thing is that, the right wing here in the United States argued for a long time that to have courts impose marriage equality was illegitimate because the people didn't want it. And we were quite adamant about saying, look, this is not something to be voted on as a popularity contest. This is about a basic human right. And the problem is that race comes into play in large measure in this debate in Bermuda, because you have a black population governed by a white governor general.
In a funny hat.
In a very funny hat, and a British government that's very white. And do they impose their opinion on a population that feels justifiably sensitive to the fact that they're being
they kind of feel, if he were to veto this, which doesn't seem likely, that this would help lead to independence for Bermuda.
Well, that would be interesting.
In Germany, by the way, they have a tough new law now that says you can fine a social media company up to $60 million. I don't know how many Egyptian pounds that is, if they don't remove hate speech and fake news quickly. And the first to be taken down was a tweet by Beatrix von Storch, the out lesbian far-right member of parliament. And she was criticizing the police for sending out a New Year's message in Arabic, accusing them of appeasing, quote, barbaric, gang-raping Muslim hordes of men. The police are asking prosecutors to investigate her for incitement to hatred. She was off Twitter for 12 hours. If only we could do that to our president.
Well, remember the Twitter employee who did take down Trump's account for a few minutes.
Yes, unilaterally.
Yeah.
By the way, the population of the world that's covered by same-sex marriage or civil unions is up to 1.4 billion now. Marriage rights, 1.2 billion.
I was interested to read about the new Salman Rushdie novel that's being published, The Golden House. He said, he's written these books that are sort of more mystical or fantastical. And
the Satanic Verses.
Yes. He wanted to write a straighter novel. But what he talks about is that the son of the main character struggles with his gender identity. This is one of the main themes of the book. And when he was questioned about it in an interview, he said, well, I grew up in Bombay with the Hijra transgender population. I have trans friends who have transitioned both male to female and female to male, so I am hip enough about this to be interested and to write about it. So this is the new Salman Rushdie novel, The Golden House, which we can look forward to.
Right.
And I also saw the first episode of season 4 of I Am Jazz, which I have found a fascinating series on the Learning Channel, because it really is taking Jazz through her teen years, growing up, transitioning, and she is far from a perfect human being, and she just lets it all hang out, and it's really quite interesting to watch. So it's back for season 4. I think you can see season 3 on demand if you want to catch up on something, some of it, but it's not too late to jump in, and it's really quite compelling.
Well, when Jack Lemmon said, I'm a man, at the end of Some Like It Hot, Joey Brown said, nobody's perfect. The Golden Globes are this weekend, and if you follow award shows, as a lot of our viewers do, you can go to goldderby.com, goldderby.com, and they give you a lot of expert opinions on who's going to win on all the award shows. I finally saw I, Tonya.
Yes.
I did not know who was playing the mother for a while. I didn't. I mean,
Really?
No, because
Allison Janney did not look that different.
unrecognizable. I finally said, my God, that's Allison Janney, willing to be such a miserable character.
Horrible.
And that was a lot of the humor in the thing.
Yeah.
I didn't.
No, I thought the funny one was the bodyguard who hired the killers, Sean.
Well,
he was hilarious.
You feel bad laughing at some of this stuff. They are going to do a Tonya Harding special on 2020 on January 11th on ABC.
My DVR is already set.
Oh, and Margot Robbie, who plays Tonya, says that Tonya has given the film a thumbs up. I, Tonya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and over the Christmas holidays, I caught up on a lot of movies.
Yeah.
From the most esoteric to the most simple-minded, particularly in the simple-minded category, my guilty pleasure, the Pitch Perfect movies. And I haven't seen Pitch Perfect 3 yet. I'm a little scared because it got such bad reviews. But I like the singing in the first two. And I also realized how homoerotic they are. Anna Kendrick has crushes on the big German singer. There's an out lesbian character who's very good and very tough, played by Esther Dean. She's terrific. So there are some things to pick up in even the most simplistic-minded movies when it's Christmas vacation and you're looking for something to watch.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. See you then.
Bye.